Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the live stream. Today we are looking at how the bass clef works. So, I will pop the screen up now for you to see. So, here is the page we're working on in the textbook today. So, it is here. It's page 19. Now, we're not going to be doing all the questions on this page right now, but we'll come back to some of these questions, but we're just looking at the top half first. So, today we are looking at the bass clef. So, let's have a look at this little canon here called Alleluia. It's a song we sang a little while ago on page 6. I'm going to sing it to you now. It goes like this. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. As you'll notice, this is the same Alleluia canon that we sang on page 6, but I've sung it at a much lower pitch. When music is written on the staff for low voices or instruments, we are no longer able to use the treble clef seen at the start of the Alleluia canon on page 6. Instead, we use the bass, or otherwise known as the F clef, seen at the start of the Alleluia canon at the top of this page. So here it is. Let me just jump back to where it was on the previous page. So if we go back to here, there it is. So there it is written in treble clef. So you can see it starts up here on a high C. So I'm not going to sing that high anymore. That was a bit dodgy of my voice. But there it is in treble clef. We've learnt treble clef before. We know that's like C, G, A, E, F, D, and so on. Or Do, So, La, Mi, Fa, Re, and so on. So when we look at it today, and let's see if we can get back to the same page easily. There it is again. It's in bass clef. So firstly, what is a bass clef? Well, that's what a bass clef is. It's sort of like a little curly line with two dots on it. And you would have noticed over here that it was referred to as being the F clef. And the reason it's called the F clef is there's two reasons why. Firstly, those two dots right there actually surround the line on the bass stave that is the note F. We'll learn more about how to identify that soon. So the two dots show where F is. The other thing is, though, is that the bass clef, like it is here, looks like an old-fashioned F. And like you might be going, how does that look like an F? But if you've all looked at a Fender guitar before, you have probably seen this. Yep. You might have seen that on a Fender guitar with the F written like that. If you haven't seen that before, then I'll show it to you another time on a guitar. But that's how the F was written on a Fender guitar. That's like an old-fashioned F. So that's how it's been changed to be a bass clef, and then those two dots show the F. So, moving on. Oops. Done. Let's have a look at how this all works. So, first things first, little definition here from Deborah Smith is a bass clef is the sign placed at the start of a piece of music telling us that this music has been written for bass or low voices or instruments. So for example, music played by bass guitar would be in bass clef. The left hand of a piano, the lower notes are in the bass clef. A whole range of other lower instruments use the bass clef, and male voices, bass and tenor, would use the bass clef. So it's full lower sounding instruments. Now you're probably wondering, why do we need another system? What's going on here? Trust me, there's no conspiracy here. It's not out to catch you and make you learn something new for the sake of it. I'll explain why in a moment, why the bass clef is really, really important. But before I show you that, let's actually just look at how it works. So, in bass clef, the note that sits in the second space is C. The note that then sits on the third line is D, and so on. So the note in the second top space is E, the second top line is F, top space is G, there's A on the top line, B lives at the top, and C gets its own little ledger line. You're probably wondering, how am I going to remember all of this? Well, there are some little rhymes. Like, you know, for treble clef, we've got every good boy deserves fruit for the lines and face for the space. Well, we do have some rhymes here. So let's have a look at what they are. I'm going to start with the spaces, and I'm going to expand this out a little bit just to make it easier with writing on the pen. So here are the lines. So there's line 1, sorry, space 1, space 2, space 3, space 4. I would recommend you do this in your books right now. So we didn't actually look at a note for the bottom space, but I can tell you that bottom space is A. So the note that sits in the bottom is A, and the rhyme starts with all, with A being the note. What's the next space up? That's a C. We can see that. It's labelled on the page as a C. So the next word is cows. All cows. Okay, what's the next space? It's an E. All cows eat. What do they eat? What's the top space here? G. They eat grass. So, little rhyme we can use to work out the bass clef spaces is all cows eat grass. Apparently in Japan they feed them all sorts of wonderful things, including malt whiskey and stuff, and apparently the meat as a result tastes absolutely wonderful. But the majority of cows out there, they eat grass. Okay, there's a little bit of history and fact for you about meat production in Japan, but let's move on. So, hopefully you've written that down by now. It'll be on the page for a little longer, but I do want to slide across here. I've just expanded the page out and magnified it a bit, just so it's easier for me to draw on with the Apple Pencil that I've borrowed from my daughter. You know how hard it is to buy an iPad at the moment? I don't own one personally, but I've got one coming on order. They are sold out everywhere. Anyway, the lines. So I'm trying my best to get the lines happening. So the line rhyme is also a little different from the treble. So what was that bottom? Oops, I've just done an extra line there that I didn't mean to do. That bottom line. Well, let's take a guess. If the bottom space here is A, what's the line directly below it going to be? What's one note below A? Oh, you're thinking, well, there is no letter in the alphabet before A. Remember, it's a circular pattern. So before A, we go back to G. That bottom line is G. I'm not going to give you the rhyme yet. Let's go through and look at each of the notes. So G. This line here hasn't been named on the scale, but if that space is A, what's the line going to be? It'll be B. And then we can see the rest of the lines here. D for that line, F for that line, and A for that line. So it's G, B, D, F, A. And what is the rhyme? Let's get a bit more space here. The rhyme is good birds don't fly away. Now that we've learned bass clef, I'm going to be adding bass clef questions into your musictheory.net tasks. So when you see them coming up this week, don't be confused now what the bass clef is. So good birds don't fly away for the lines. Cool. And there we go. So I'll give you a few moments to write that in. I'll send to the page now so you can see that. Cool. Just take a few moments to write that down quickly. Now, I was saying to you before, look, this bass clef system hasn't been created to just annoy students, to have to learn something new. You might ask, why can't we just do everything in treble clef? Well, I'll show you why in just a moment. Hopefully you've had enough time to get that done. I'm just going to change pages on my iPad, so let's go back to this. And here we go. I've actually given you a bass and treble stave here. Now, first things first, if I was to, say, write a scale here, I'm going to write a scale. Oops, I need to remember to, oops, I have just turned this off too. My apologies. That's better. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to write some notes here. So, in the treble stave, that's C, that's D, that's E, that's F, that's G, that's A, B, and so on. So I'll label them C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now this isn't in your textbook, by the way. This is just a demonstration for you to see. There we go. If we, in treble clef, if we wanted to write anything lower than C, we used ledger lines. But ledger lines can become troublesome. You don't want to write thousands of ledger lines all the time. You could technically ignore the fact that there's a bass clef stave in the way, but to get really low notes, you might need to like do lots and lots of ledger lines to get a note down in the bass clef for, like, say, a bass guitar. And that gets really messy if you have to write all those ledger lines to be able to get the notes that we need. So instead, that is why we have the bass clef. So I'll explain how it works. So I'm just going to erase all that. And let's have a look here. So what do we do instead? Well, I can tell you now that the bass clef is really just an extension of the treble clef. So there is C in the treble clef. Here is C in the bass clef. And then if we keep on going down now with notes, then we don't have to start using ledger lines, and that's the dodgiest ledger line I've ever seen, so let me just get rid of that and try again. We don't have to start using ledger lines all the way down to here, which is fantastic. So if this note is C, what's one note lower than C? It's B, and then one note lower than B is A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, and E, and so on and so forth. So as a reminder of the spaces, it makes sense. Like there's A, all, cows, eat, grass, and the lines, good, birds, don't, fly away. So that all matches up, doesn't it? So that is why we have a bass clef, just to extend the treble clef. For those of you who learned bass clef first, you're probably just equally annoyed about having to learn treble clef. So we'd say that's an extension of the bass clef. They both allow the notes to be written much higher and lower than we otherwise would be able to. Now, a fun fact. You've heard me talk about the note middle C, especially when we've been playing on the piano. We've talked about middle C, and you might take a guess and say, oh, it's called middle C because it's near the middle of the piano. Well, look, it is near the middle of the piano, but that's not why it's called middle C. It's called middle C because it is the C that lives in the middle of what we call the grand staff. So when you put treble and bass clef together like this, you get what's called a grand staff or grand stave, and there is middle C in the middle. So there's a little bit of a lesson on bass clef and why it exists. Okay, so we're going to do some activities today in the book, followed by then some musictheory.net tasks in the links. Let me just jump back to the textbook. Here we go. And let's have a look at some questions. So we're going to not worry about looking at this here today. We'll come back to look at these another day. These are just the F major and G major scales written out in bass clef, but let's not worry about them too. Now there's also a little bit of information here on intervals and their full names. Now I've already exposed you to the full names. We've used the words like perfect and major when talking about intervals. So there it is officially in the page now too. And later on we'll come back and do some listening questions, but not today. Right now we are going to have a look at these questions and name these notes. And so we're going to have a go at this question today. I'll do the first half with you, and then you can do the second half later. So first things first, we're going to label these notes just with their letter names. We're not going to worry about the solfa today. I know Deborah Smith would be horrified to hear that, but we're just going to do the letter names today. So let's see if I can try and get the previous scale and that question on the page. Not really. Well, maybe, why don't I try this? What if I turn the page a bit? Oh no, it's not going to work. That's right. You can look back in your book at the names of the notes because the scale is just here, right here. In your books you can go back and look at that to do this question. I can't have both on the screen at the same time, unfortunately. So, let's have a look at this question. So, you can go backwards and forwards between your questions, or you can use our little rhyme. All cows eat grass and good birds don't fly away. Both will work quite fine. So, let's look at this note here. It is in the second space. The second space note is C. Oops. Let's circle it again. So, that note was C. We also know it's C because if you go in the spaces, it's all cows. Okay, let's look at this note. I'm not going to jump backwards and forwards between the screen right now. You can do that yourselves with your books that you've got at home. That is on the third line. So, good birds don't. So, we'll label that with a D. Let's look at the next note here. And it is on the third space. So, all cows eat. Let's look at this one. It's on the second top line. So, good birds don't fly. F. Cool. Does that give you the idea about how it works? I'm going to leave the remainder of that line here for you to do. And hello, Jay. I've noticed you've popped up in the live chat. Good to see you. I'll mark you present in the role in just a minute. So, that is the base Clef question that I'll be getting you to do right now. We're going to skip this one right now. That's another day. And we're actually not going to do this one either. But we are going to attempt... We'll come back to them, by the way. It's not like we're not going to do them. I'll save them for another lesson. What I would like to do is this dictation question right here, using the base Clef that we've just learned about. So, it is very similar to the one I did with you on the treble stave a few lessons ago. So, if I just quickly jump into my book, I'll find out what we're doing with this question. Okay, so this question is going to have, including the given note here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes. So my strong recommendation is pop in 8 lines underneath here. And I've really not done that well. I should space them out a bit further. There are 8 lines for us to pop our notes. When I do this melodic dictation, I'll be playing just semi-breves. It'll just be 4 count notes, slowly, one after the other on this occasion. So, we have learned in the past that the first note of a dictation will always be Do. We know this is also Do because it is an F. It's an F. We know it's an F because if we use our rhyme for the lines of good birds don't fly away, the bottom line there is G, so one note lower is F. We can also see a flat on the B line for the key signature, confirming that the scale that this question is being played in, or the key of the question, is F major. So we can confidently label that note Do. Similar to last time we did one of these stave dictations, just put the solfa in underneath, because we can work out the notes on the stave later once we have the solfa correctly learned. Now, I can tell you that this question right here is going to use most of the notes from the solfa scale through to from Do up to Do. One of them will be missing, but I'm not going to say which one. So, to prepare for this question, I'm going to write the solfa scale here just so I know the order of the notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you know I like to put a little set of steps underneath so I can see the notes in their correct order. So, let us try this question now. So, firstly, I'm going to turn my piano on. Rather than being up here in the treble stave, sorry, and I always yell at you guys when you make silly sounds with your keyboards by accident. Well, I don't yell at you, but I tell you off. And I just did it myself. Sorry about that, guys. I think my daughter might have been in here fiddling with the keyboard earlier. Let's try again. Okay, so the notes we're using, take 2 for this question, is... I've just lost my spot in my book. That's very silly of me. Sorry about this, guys. Found it. Cool. Actually, I was telling you porcupines. we're not using all of the notes in the scale today. I thought we were, but I was looking at the wrong question. So let's erase a little bit of what I just did. So we're only going to be going up to so today. So get rid of the rest of this. My apologies. It is live television, I guess live streaming. Mistakes sometimes are made. My apologies. So instead of being up here in the treble stave, we are jumping down to the bass stave. So, much lower in pitch. You can still hum along to these questions if you have a higher voice, then of course just hum an octave or two higher. But for some of you guys in this class, this will be great to be able to sing down in your natural range, because we're starting on a low F, which is typically where your typical sort of baritone voice bottoms out. So, I'm going to play this question to you now, and your job right now is to have a listen and try and pick out what the solfa notes are as we move along. A reminder, each note will be the same length, a semibreve, and we are just working from do up to so on this occasion. Here we go. So I'll play it to you 5 times. Feel free to hum along as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you probably heard there that most of those notes moved by step, but you probably also heard that there were just a handful of small leaps as well. So I'll play you that question again. Here's your second of 5 playings. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've probably picked up by now that this question follows the standard rule for melodic dictations, and it starts and ends on do. I'll even pencil that in for you. Okay, I'm going to play it again a third time. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're probably hearing from the shape that it certainly starts heading up first and eventually comes down, but around the middle it does jump around a little bit. I'm going to play it to you a 4th time now. 1, 2, 3, 4. At this stage you may already be trying to write the notes in, but if you don't know how to do that, don't stress, I'll show you in a moment. I'm hoping you've got your solfa in here now, but I will play this question one more time to give you a chance to check over your answer and get any more notes that you need to get. Here we go. 5th and final playing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'll just give you a few more moments to finish off writing your solfa in. Okay, let's start breaking this question down a little bit. I'm going to play you the first 5 notes. there's the first four notes. Da, 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 da. You probably heard it move by step except for that last note. So we can hear that the first, at least three notes, are moving by step. Da, da, da. Do, re, mi. Now you're probably trying to work out what's this next note. So let's play it again. Da, 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 da. It does jump. How much by? I recommend just singing the notes that might fall in between. So da 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 da. There was one note in between. Do re mi fa so mi so. Not just a nice Japanese food, by the way. Miso? Haha, come on. I'm trying to keep the jokes going. So do re mi so. Let me now play you from the start to the next note. You can hear that it's jumped back down quite a lot lower. Da, 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 da. Some of you might have heard that as returning back to the tonic. Da for the first note, da, 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 and that next note. The other thing you could do is work out the interval. Ba, ba, da, 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 da. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or the interval, twinkle, twinkle, for the song. So we know it goes down a fifth, but we also probably already heard that it just lands back to the tonic, do, which is a fifth down from so. Okay, let's have a listen to it a few more times, or one more time hopefully, and we should get the answer. This is from the start. Now, if we're looking from here, the fourth last note, it was... And you're probably saying, oh, there's a jump. How do I work out the jump? Now, some of you probably can hear the jump and have already worked it out, but most of you also probably noticed that after that jump, it then returned to do by step. So you could actually work this out backwards. If that all moved down by step, that's a do. So one higher is re, and one higher is mi. And then you would have seen da da do mi is a third. Da 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 do and the same. And then you've got your notes. Okay, so we've got the actual melody worked out, but what are the notes? Now, to get this right at this stage, you don't even need to know the names of your notes in the bass clef, because we know how the notes move in order by step. So if we've got do to re, we know that re is one note higher than do. So what's one note higher than a note that sits just below the stave? It would be the note that sits on the first line of the stave. That's also a G in bass clef, if you're wondering. So, with that said, my computer has just failed for some reason. So, technical issues aside, I'll just quickly reconnect. And I think we're good to go back and try it again. And yes, okay, so the note I just put on before this all sort of went a bit haywire was that note there. So G, because it's one note higher than do to re. Okay, let's move on, because we're almost done, almost finished. So, do, re, mi, we know that re and mi are a step apart. Mi is a step higher. So, a step higher than the note on the line is in the space. There you go. And then so. Now, so is a jump. Mi, fa, so. So is two notes higher. So, if mi is in the space, fa will be on the line, so is in the next space. Cool. Okay, back to do. We know what do is. We've had a do already. It was F, which sits just at the bottom. There you go. Mi. We've already had a mi. It was there. Mi is in the space. It's an A in bass clef. Re, well, it's one note lower. We've also had one back here. And then do, well, we've had it at the start here. So There it is. And that is our completed dictation. So that's Bass Clef for you. We won't do a lot of work in Bass Clef this year in the remaining work that we do in the semester, but it will be there. It will be included in a question in one of your tests, so you can't ignore it. But it will become a regular feature of our work in Year 11 and 12, as both bass and treble clef are used equally. I'm going to sign off for now on YouTube Live. If you've got any further questions or assistance that you need from me, jump back into Zoom, and I'm happy to provide you with further support there. If you've got any other question about work we've done earlier in the term, I'm happy to provide any support and advice as required. So, anyhow, I'm signing off now from YouTube Live. See you back in Zoom shortly.